Let's jump right into painting birds, specifically birds in flight. I'm going to show you 3 different styles of birds that I like to use in my watercolor landscapes. And if you're an absolute beginner, not to worry. We'll start with the most simple and work from there. So grab a brush with a fine tip, either a liner, a pointed round, or a detail brush, just as long as you have a fairly small point at the end. This first one is the basic V bird that we've all seen and likely used at some point. So try painting a standard V, just like you would write the letter. And now we're going to try a narrow V and a wide V. Now let's see what happens when we curve the tops inward. It's a whole new look, isn't it? And what about a bubbly V? Now this one looks more like an M, but that's all right. I'm still going to include it in this category. Now let's play with all the directions as well. So once again, all we're doing is just making the letter V in different sizes, slightly different shapes, and varying the directions. All right, are we feeling good about the level 1 birds? Let's go ahead and add a handful to our first landscape. The key to making your scene look more natural and interesting is using a variety of options. It's funny how when we start out, we tend to pick one shape and stick with it, and I'm including myself here. For the longest time, all of my birds looked like that first standard V, wings up, not much variation. But that's going to get boring. Birds in the wild don't look all the same. If you were to take a picture of a group of birds in the sky, you would notice that they're different sizes and shapes. Some wings might be pointed upwards, others might be almost horizontal, while some might be facing downwards. And if I add a mix of these birds to my landscape painting, it's going to be more fun to look at and honestly more fun to paint too. Okay, so that was easy enough, right? Even if you've never even picked up a paintbrush before, I think you can handle these ones. So now we're going to move on to level 2. And honestly, these birds are not much different than the previous ones. We are, however, going to be adding a body this time around. So we're going to do the same basic shape that you're already comfortable with, but with a different approach. So did you notice how I was starting in the center and then flipping outwards? So when I start the bird, I'm just going to rest my paintbrush for just a moment or two and then flip. So let's try that again. Rest, flip, rest, flip. And you might feel like you have less control at first, but I find that it helps give the wingtips a more tapered look. Plus, you'll notice that it adds a little touch of the unexpected. It's perfectly fine if both sides don't look the same. In fact, I think if one wing looks larger than the other, it actually gives the illusion that one wing is closer to the viewer, which is kind of nice. And the coolest part here is every time we do that slight pause or rest, it actually creates a small body. Isn't that cool how it looks like the little body of a bird? And depending on how hard you push your brush into the paper when you do the rest, that'll kind of make the body slightly bigger or slightly smaller. So definitely play around with that. Rest, flip, rest, flip. Rest, flip, rest, flip. Okay, and for some of these, the body just didn't turn out quite as large as I wanted, so I'm going to go back through and just give it a little tiny tap. Just add a line or a dot, and that's all it takes. Okay, ready to add our level 2 birds to the next landscape? So just like when we practiced, we'll be resting and then flipping. Rest, flip, rest, flip. And let's do a little sideways guy over here. He needs a little bit more of a body, so I just tapped my brush on there. And I'm really not too worried about what the base of the V looks like, because depending on angles and kind of how the bird is flying, they're always going to look a little bit different. Sometimes the body is going to be more visible, and sometimes it'll hardly be visible at all. I really don't think there's a right or wrong way to do this, but the basic idea of the level 2 birds is to provide just a little bit more detail than the first level 1 birds. Not much, just the hint of a body. And let's make sure to get a few with the wings down. All right, I think we have plenty of birds in the sky now. So we're going to be moving on to level 3, the birds with the most detail. Building off the same basic shape as level 1 and 2, this time we want the wings to be a little bit thicker. And we're going to go with the occasional hint of feathers as well. So you can see on the wing tips there's just a little bit sticking out here and there. And instead of just a small mark or a dot for the body, try to create a head and a tail. And don't worry about perfection. Depending on the type of bird, the head might be larger, more pronounced, or it could be quite small in comparison to the wingspan. Don't worry too much about the details. The tail might be narrow or wide, and there are so many types of birds out there that you really just don't need to get hung up on what's right and what's wrong. Some tails are even split or forked, so just play around with a variety of options and see what you like. And I like to see what these birds will look like facing all different directions. So you can see the last one I did was facing to the left, and then this one I will have facing to the right. And let's add some more feathers to these wing tips here. All right, I like how that looks. And now let's add some level 3 birds to the landscape. And I did grab some more black paint. My level 3 birds on that practice sheet were looking a little bit weak and watered down towards the end there. I always struggle a little bit when I'm recording because I'm trying to stay out of the shot, but I'm also needing to be close enough to actually see the details of my birds. So hopefully this will work out okay. And this is probably my favorite direction to paint. I just love it when the birds are soaring straight up into the sky. All right, so now that we've painted the 3 separate landscapes with level 1, 2, and 3 birds, we're going to do one final landscape, bringing them all together. So let's talk about when we use the level 1 birds. Well, I like to paint them pretty small and not overly dark, and I use these birds when I want them to be far off in the distance. And sometimes I like to paint little clusters of these guys. I think of the level 1 birds as the background birds. And now we're going to move straight into some level 2 birds. So these, of course, have slightly more detail. They're going to be larger than the level 1 birds and preferably slightly darker as well. And so in comparison, they are going to appear closer. So these are the middle ground birds. On to level 3. And I think we can all guess what role these birds will play. So larger in size, with much more detail than the others, these are going to be the foreground birds. They're closer to the viewer, so naturally we can make out the individual features, the head, the tail, maybe even some of the feathers on the wings. I use level 3 birds sparingly because they can easily overwhelm a painting if you add too many. And I know these birds are nothing fancy, but if you are brand new to this, I hope it will help you at least get started. And I think the more you play around with the different wing positions and the different looks, you'll very quickly start to figure out what you like and what's going to fit best for your style. I feel like I need just a few more little background birds up here. And I think I'm going to stop right about there. Okay, so as you can see, we accomplished something pretty cool by adding these 3 different types of birds to the landscape. So I purposely started off with a very, very flat looking landscape without much detail at all. And by adding these 3 different types of birds, we actually created some depth to that otherwise very boring flat landscape. But now, as you can see, we have a background, a middle ground, and a foreground. So just imagine what you can do with these birds when you actually do have an exciting background to work with. Well, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.